Okay, amazing. So we're gonna do chapter 5. Did I tell you chapter 3? Chapter 5 is actually what we're doing.
Oh, okay, that's okay. I just do next. Next and chapter five. Next. So we're chapter five.
Chapter 5. Okay, chapter 5, bringing the closer. Bringing the closer. That was really the Rebbe's approach, as we're going to discuss. Um, and It really is a hallmark of the Rebbe's approach. We're coming up of Gimel Tammuz, and I just yesterday, oh, I should send out the recording of that. There was an event that Chaya Ben Amon, I think that's her last name, puts together these beautiful, lovely Torah classes every week. And usually she has somebody share kind of like a life story. And she asked me to share my story, my husband's story, as it relates to the Rebbe in honor of Gimel Tammuz. And that was last night. It was really a beautiful event. So I'll send the replay to that. She just sent it to me. It was interesting because we started the event with a clip of an interview that Larry King did after Gimel Tammuz, after the Rebbe's passing, and he interviewed Rabbi Lipsker and Alava Shalom and Rabbi Simon Jacobson, and then some other Dr. Nadler, some person who's an expert in Judaic studies or something like that. This person had a very pessimistic view, and in a sense, also Larry King about the Rebbe's passing. And yet we see the beautiful words of Rabbi Lipsker in the video and Rabbi Simon Jacobson about the eternality of the Rebbe, the eternality of a tzaddik, and of his legacy and so on and so forth. And, kind of letting us, telling the world that this is not the end. Then we started with my story, and I guess but my story is not unique. There are so many others. The proof is in the pudding, right? The Rebbe's alive through the shluchim, through the lay leaders, through all of us who connect to his teachings, who've continued the mission. We were having that discussion yesterday. It was very beautiful to see how off the mark these people were. Today we see that the impact of the Rebbe's vision, and the hallmark, as I was saying, of the Rebbe's vision is this idea that, as we've been discussing up till now, that everybody is a Jew is a soul in essence, and focusing on the essence and knowing that the soul is always pristine and intact, and therefore when we're reaching out to another person, when we're showing them, when we're teaching them about the beauty of Judaism, we're not bringing somebody who's far away, but really we're touching somebody who is already close. They're close because they are, in essence, they have a chelek elokah mimal, a mamash, as the Alter Rebbe says, literally a chelek elokah, a piece of God, and therefore that's who they are. And therefore, we're just bringing the closer. We're not bringing the term kiruv. The Rebbe was a term that we don't use in Lubavitch because it suggests that you're bringing somebody from far away to near, but really they were never far away. Because if you look at it from the perspective of the soul, and that's again the hallmark of the Rebbe's approach, is that's who they are, right? And that's what we discussed last time, right? That's who the person is. And therefore the approach is we're bringing the closer. We're just showing them who they are. That's all. We're just literally showing them to peel the layers of that covers who they really are. Like they're just wearing a bunch of garments, and okay, but that's it's like you're wearing a costume. You're wearing a costume. And I think we had a story last time we met about that, right? About the person who went, and I think it was with maybe the story maybe was with the Tzaddik Tzedek, and he was saying like he's a hypocrite. He showed up at the Tzaddik Tzedek, I guess in casual clothes. I can't remember so well, but and he said like he's a hypocrite, and the Rebbe, whichever the Rebbe was that was interacting with this gentleman said, "Oh no, I thought the reality is the person who shows up in the jeans or in the casual clothes is not the real one, because the whole thing was like he was saying he's not going to show, and he's going to not going to show up in Hasidic garb anymore to see the Rebbe, because he felt like a hypocrite, because really he felt like that's not him. And in the Rebbe's eyes is like, no, the hypocrite is the one who's wearing these garments, right? Because you really are a yid who manifests, expresses his Yiddishkeit, his the elements of his neshama, of his soul. So let's dive into chapter 5. Anyway, I will try to link to the recording of yesterday's event, because I think you guys will enjoy it. It was very, very beautiful. And I'm not saying that because it was my story. I think Chaya did a beautiful job of asking questions at the end, that there was a beautiful discussion. So hopefully you'll enjoy what I had to share, both in terms of my story as well as in terms of the things that I responded and the answers I gave to her questions and the audience's questions. Okay, so now he's going to tell us, Rabbi Kalmenson is going to tell us here, going to give a little bit of a background of, kind of the beginnings. What was the context? What is the historical context in which the Baal Shem Tov came in? And again, just to stress, because I know for many of us, we're in this class and it really is supposed to be a bitachon class. And it's like the whole thing is like, how did we end up with positivity bias? It's because we've drilled bitachon so much. And we realize that so much of bitachon is really learning to look at things from a godly perspective, right? If I can learn, if I can surrender more, or I can surrender if I understand that God is the one running the show, running my life, if I can see from his perspective how everything is happening. And from that perspective, everything is positive and everything is good, right? And we go back to the 7 attributes of God that are stated in the Shar B'tachon, the first one being God is merciful and kind, and the seventh one being he's extremely generous to the deserving and the undeserving. From God's perspective, we just see a flow of chesed. So the more I can see the beauty, the good, the kindness in every single thing, in every interaction, right? Including, as we're going to see in today's chapter, interaction with people who might be deemed by other people as far away. No, they're not far away if you look at them from the perspective of the soul, which again is something that we touched upon last week. And we had the story of the pomegranates and the Gemara that, on that discussion that the Rebbe had with another Rebbe, I think it was another Rebbe from another sect. And they had this question about the Gemara, and the Rebbe's approach is like, no, how could they be called sinners if they have so many mitzvahs like a pomegranate, right? And every Jew has mitzvahs. Every Jew, in essence, is in every shape or form, even if it's not, predicated by halacha, and they might not know it. There's something beautiful that they're doing. And it's so funny because Chaya, in one of the questions, actually worded it that way, which speaks about her high sensitivity as a person who's been influenced and grew up her whole life with the perspective of the Rebbe. Okay, so page 59, he's going to start with Jewish life in Eastern Europe, giving us context where the Baal Shem Tov came into the picture with this new approach to look at life, okay? And I say new, not because it's new to Judaism. It's more to emphasize that it's historically new in a sense, as we will see, okay? So Jewish life in Eastern Europe during the 1700s was particularly precarious amid persistent outbursts of extreme violence directed at whole communities. So we have to understand that this is a time of pogroms. This is a time of a lot of economic uncertainty, okay? The Jewish people were still reeling from the shock and destruction left in the wake of the Khmelnytsky massacres, which left over 100,000 Jews dead across the Ukrainian landscape. Additionally, the failed messianic fervor of Shabtai Tzvi, who eventually converted to Islam, dealt a crushing blow to the Jewish spirit and morale from Europe to North Africa all the way to the Middle East. So there was a certain nervousness, there was a certain despair, there was a certain lack of hope. They've been through so much. They've been through persecution. They've been through financial constraints, and they've been through a false messiah. I mean, it's like the Baal Shem Tov is coming into a time where the Jews were really, really, at least in that region, in a very, very low place. Internally, the Jewish world was also at odds with itself and coming apart at the seams. The social gap between the educated elite and the unlettered masses was a seemingly unbridgeable chasm. I don't know. I never know how to pronounce that word, but like, so forgive me. Leaving the majority. It's like there's certain things I should tell you. Like there's certain things after so many years speaking English. There's always like certain things that give it away. Like there's certain words that I'll never know how to say properly. Will give it away. Okay, because then I'll have people say, "Oh, I don't think you have an accent. Oh, I never knew you have it." And it's like, no, 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 I do. Just stay close to me for long enough. You'll realize that it's not my first language. Okay. Leaving the majority of Jews to feel spiritually unworthy and incompetent, relegating the pursuit of God and Torah to the privileged few. So we have to understand also that aside from the external pressures, internally, at this point in history, there was a huge divide within the Jewish community between the elite who was able to study Torah and focus on learning Talmud, Gemara, and the non-learned. Because of the financial circumstances, there were many people who weren't given the opportunity to go sit and learn. There wasn't enough resources in the community to support everybody to learn. So many families were Torah illiterate, okay? And then you had many families who had people who learned. So this progressively became an increasing rift in the community. And that's what he's saying this. So this is all, again, the backdrop, the historical context in which the Baal Shem Tov comes in. Again, you're coming from the footsteps of Shabtai Tzvi. You're coming from pogroms and persecutions. You're coming from financial situations that had already led for many years to this increasing divide within the community, where you have a group that is learned and a group that is illiterate, which leads to the illiterate feeling disconnected and leads to the learned feeling superior. Okay. So that's the context of where the Baal Shem Tov is coming into, okay? So, additionally, the Enlightenment was beginning to impact the lives of young intellectuals throughout Europe, causing many to leave religion and community behind in search of vaguely promised universal truths and individual freedoms. As a result, both the bodies and souls of the Jewish people were nearing total exhaustion and bordering on breakdown. Okay, so obviously a revival was needed, and a revival is exactly what happened. And soon he's going to compare it to the revival that the Rebbe created. But now we're going to talk about the Baal Shem Tov, the great healer, teacher, and lover of the Jewish people, known as the Baal Shem Tov, founder of the Hasidic movement, publicly appeared on this fraught historical stage in the middle of the 18th century. Functioning as a spiritual first responder, the Baal Shem Tov sought to gently uplift the beaten and battered Jews of his time, reviving them from their near pulverized state. How would he do that? What was the focus, right? The Baal Shem Tov came and actually showed everybody that their simple words of Tehillim, that was the only thing they could utter, or their simple Mode'ani, to be even more basic, right? Their simple song, okay? That is as precious, if not more precious, than the Gemara and the hours of learning of an intellectual. And so he brought that revival, that awareness that every Jew is precious, that it's not about, I don't want to say spiritual accomplishment. It's not about Torah learning. It's not about brownie points. It's not about accumulation of, how many pages of Talmud, of Gemara you're learning, right? It's about the connection. It's about the essence. It's about the soul. It's about every single individual is a chelek Eloka, okay? It's a piece of God, mamash, as the Alter Rebbe says. Okay, so functioning as in the face of suffering, he spread joy. In the face of power, he spread peace. And in the humble lives of simple Jews, he saw the highest light and the deepest sparks of divinity. Through a variety of innovative approaches, including songs, storytelling, simple faith, and ecstatic spiritual practices, the Baal Shem Tov aimed at nothing less than a full-scale renewal of the Jewish spirit. To accomplish this, he turned Kabbalah, the esoteric teachings and spiritual secrets of Torah, inside out, sharing with the masses what used to be exclusive to a religious elite, thereby sparking a popular revolution of piety and passion that reverberates to this day. So by infusing his teachings with the light of the esoteric part of Torah, that again is all about essence, it's all about depth, right? It sheds light on what's happening beneath the surface, right? Behind the halacha, behind the do's and don'ts, what's really happening, right? That is something that touches everybody's essence and core, as we know to this day, right? It's really what's kept the Jewish nation, in a sense, I don't want to say going, but it's really what sparked this revival from the Baal Shem Tov and later on, and we see it to this day, right? I always say I don't think there's any successful congregation today, okay, at least in America. I don't know Europe, but I'll tell you in America, I don't think there's no successful congregation, no successful pulpit rabbi who doesn't infuse their teachings with the light of Hasidus. There is that is something like to keep a community growing, engaged, thriving together in this day and age. You need that. People need that. People need more. People need the depth. They need the light, the understanding. And that's what the Baal Shem Tov started to bring about. And as you'll see later on, if we get to it, right, as it progressed with the Maggid of Mezrich and then progressed with the Alter Rebbe, at the time of the Alter Rebbe, there was tremendous opposition to this. But let's go back to the Baal Shem Tov. Let's fast forward to almost 200 years to 1951. Okay, so we didn't go back to Baal Shem Tov. Now we understand the context in which the Baal Shem Tov came in. Now we're going to fast forward to 1951. We're going to fast forward to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the seventh Rebbe, okay? Less than a decade after the horrors of the Holocaust and a few short years after the masses of Middle Eastern Jews had been expelled from their home countries, this was the moment when the Rebbe assumed leadership. Similar to the times of the Baal Shem Tov, spiritual calamity, confusion, trauma, and displacement were sweeping the Jewish world. The horrors of genocide and forced expulsion were leaving people with profound theological and theological questions left unanswered. So it's a very, very similar context, historical context, okay? Once again, Jewish spirit and morale were in ruins. In addition to such geopolitical upheaval, internal denominationalism, assimilation, and secularization had further unraveled the fabric of the people. For the most part, religious Jews kept to themselves, and for good reason, right? For good reason. The reasoning is we need to protect what's ours. We cannot allow the secular culture outside of us to erode, right? They saw it as a threat. It's threatening, whereas the Rebbe didn't see this as a threat. That was part of what was so revolutionary, right? Right, that the Rebbe engaged with the secular world, with the world outside, and in tremendous ways. You know, not just engaging with the people, but the use of technology and so much. Like it didn't, again, it was he didn't feel this was a threat, but there was a mindset where these things felt threatening, and so people kept to themselves. So you have people who are very, very much to themselves, and so you have religious Jews who kept to themselves, as did secular and progressive Jews. That was another thing, okay, another, I guess, a group, so to speak, right? So left to its own devices, this socio-spiritual chasm, again, that word, would have continued to grow, possibly stretching the seams of the Jewish people to the point of no return. Within this divided time, the Rebbe addressed himself first to his immediate followers, but also to the Jewish world as a whole, seeking to restore purpose, passion, cohesion, very important word, cohesion, and confidence to a broken and fragmented people. Toward this end, the Rebbe came up with a daring and risky strategy, which is best summarized by Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, former chief rabbi of England, to surge every Jew in love the way they were once hunted down in hate. And that's the point, right? Everybody was the same. Everybody's a chelek Eloka, and we're going to find them and we're going to bring them with cords of love, as the Alter Rebbe describes in Tanya, right? Just as Rabbi Sachs says, in the same way that the Nazis, Yimach Shemam, looked for us in hate, the Rebbe's approach is we're going to find every Jew and we're going to touch their soul so that they can identify with their soul, right? We're just going to show them. It's just like a little flashlight to show them, oh, this is who you really are. This is how the world really works, right? This is godliness and you have it, right? This led him to devise various programs to engage and energize the wider Jewish world outside his own circle of followers and the religious community at large. This open-armed approach sought to essentially expand the tent of holiness to make room for every Jew, no matter their background, level of knowledge, or observance. And any of us who've been to Chabad houses around the world, I actually just came from speaking at two Chabad houses, one with a pretty large Persian um, membership. I don't know what word to use, but like a pretty large part of the community was Persian. And then another one, so I was a Chabad of Great Neck, and then I was a Chabad of Milford, Connecticut, completely different, like kind of like constituents, right? But they all had that Chabad house touch. Like there was just this eclectic mix. And then in Milford, you had this eclectic mix of, secular people. You had, children of Holocaust survivors, very, very frum people, but not Hasidim, modern Orthodox people, Israeli. I mean, you had the whole mix. And in Great Neck also, but in Great Neck, you had more Sephardim as well. So it was really, again, anybody who's experienced being a Chabad house, you see what this is talking about, right? The ability to make room for every single individual. And I was having a really interesting conversation. My hostess, our hostess, the first night that we were there in Great Neck, actually, our hostess in Great Neck, was a Persian family, and so we talked about their life in Iran and how they grew up and whatever, and I asked her what, how does she feel about what's going on and what now and whatever. And she said something so interesting. She said, you know what, Yael, I want to tell you something. The Ayatollah was the best thing that happened to all of us. I said, what? She says, yeah, look at us all now. We came to this country, and thanks to the Rebbe, we all found religion. We all became frum. And it was like, oh my gosh. It was like such a perspective. She's like, yeah, like that was the best thing that happened. Look at all the Persian families. We're all now connected. We were secularized. We were, it's very interesting. So she said it's the best thing that happened to us. Who knows where we would be now? But Baruch Hashem, because of the challenge of having to escape, because of the Rashaim, right? We came to this country, and look, Chabad found us with love, and Chabad showed us what is Yiddishkeit. And she was telling us very interesting, like when they were becoming frum, was it to her that the Rebbe said? No, I don't think it was the Rebbe said to her. The Rebbe said to one of her rabbis, who's also Persian, if you're Persian, you continue your tradition. You have a Masorah, and very interesting, that morning, the next morning, my husband went to daven at the minyan. He actually, it was his father's yahrzeit, so he was davening by the Amud, and we spoke the night before, so he went to the 6 a.m. minyan. And then afterwards, he told me it was beautiful because it was all Sephardi davening. It was a Chabad house, but it was Persian davening, right? Because the Rebbe said, you have a tradition, you keep to your tradition. Like, you don't need to become. This is not like, and so many people say, like, who was telling me the other day? Oh yeah. Somebody was having an issue with their board or whatever, and somebody was saying, no, because you want to turn everybody into Chabad. And like the rabbi looked at him, I've been here 30 years. Look around you. Is anybody here Chabad other than me? Like, no, this is not about turning anybody to Chabad. This is about showing them the beauty of Yiddishkeit and the beauty of who they are. That's it. That is it. You have it in you. You don't need to be like me. You have it in you, and you can follow the same Torah, right? And you have your own traditions, and whoever's Moroccan can be Moroccan, and whoever's Sephardi can be Sephardi, right? It's all about you connecting to your essence. It's not about you now wearing a costume and, you have to be this cookie cutter mold that I'm trying to. No, it's not about that. Okay. So I get off track. So where am I? Where am I? Oh, I'm on page 61. 61. Okay. Okay. We were in Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. Okay. So, okay. Okay. From this perspective, I'm in the last paragraph. From this perspective, it becomes clear that Judaism is not so much a religion as it is a family, right? You are not a member of a family on account of your behavior. You are a member of a family in an irrevocable way. Even the quote unquote wicked son of the Haggadah is still part of the family. Of course, it is always unfortunate when family members are estranged, but it doesn't make them any less family. We all have a seat at the table. And if you remember when a a few months ago during these, what do you call it? The pro-Palestinian, what do you call it? The marches, what do you call it? The protests, right? You remember that video that was going around, or those pictures of the Lubavitch Bachurim, like in the middle, I like, oh my gosh, like in the middle of the protest, putting on tefillin to the young kid with the kafia and the thing. And you say, where does it come from that these boys have this attitude of, it's mamash mesiras nefesh. They're, like, to go into the mass of these, right? Just to find that Jew, to have him do a mitzvah, because that's going to connect him to his soul, right? It's just a crazy concept. But where does it come from? It comes from this approach. It comes from the Baal Shem Tov, and it comes from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who emphasized this for our generation, right? Why? Yeah, the kid who's in the protest is completely, he lost the plot, no question. But it doesn't matter, because that's not what I'm looking at. I don't care what he thinks. I don't care that he's wearing the thing. I don't care that he's saying pro-pala, free ply, whatever the nonsense they're saying, right? I just care that he's a chelek eloka, that he's a soul. And I'm here to show him that there's a soul in there that is a Jewish neshama and can do Jewish things, and to help him activate that soul, right? The externality doesn't face me. The externality is not what I focus on. Okay. So that's the approach. We're all family. And because we're family, we care for each other. And if he's my brother, he's my family, I have to help him. So I have to give him the opportunity to do something good for him. And that would be a mitzvah in this case. Okay. So according to Hasidus, every Jewish soul is essentially pure and incorruptible at its core, and nothing can ever sever the eternal bond with the divine. It is from that inner point of essence that the Rebbe sought to connect and build up each individual whom he encountered. And again, we see it today in the beautiful Bachurim and the beautiful Shluchim, right? They give up they do so much. The Shluchim give up their lives. The Bachurim give up their time of Torah learning. So interesting. Recently, somebody asked me, they give up their time of Torah learning. I should finish my sentences from time to time. To go spend time on mifsoim and put on tefillin on people and bring them Hanukkah candles and bring them Shabbos lecht and all these things. Somebody asked me, "Oh, what's your son doing in the summer?" And I said, "Oh, he works in camp. Like that's what he does every summer, right?" It's like, and she's like, "Oh, he doesn't go somewhere to he doesn't go to Israel to like learn at another yeshiva or something?" I was like, "No, like he goes to help other people like that's." And I had a friend who also told me one time. I was like, "Oh, thank God for my oldest. Like he ran the whole birthday party for my son. Like at this point, like I don't have to do anything." My Sherry, my Menachem must have been like 9 years old or something. And Moshe David ran the whole, he happened to be in town. So he ran the whole party for the boys, whatever. And she's like, "Wow, Yael, you know why that is?" I'm like, "No, like why?" Like it didn't I wasn't expecting a reaction. Just like I was telling her, "Oh, yeah, I didn't have to do much. Don't worry." My friend's like, "Oh, because you must have been so busy with the birthday party." No, I didn't have to do anything. Like my son was here. He ran the birthday party. He's like, "Oh, you know why that is?" Why? Other than I don't know, because he's my son. She's like, "Because he's Lubavitch." I was like, "What? Well, what does that mean?" She's like, no, like that's just because that's a stamp. That's what Lubavitch boys do. They just help other people. They just run the show. They just run programs. They're there. And it was so interesting to hear that from my friend, because we take it for granted. Like we almost like take it for granted that this is the Rebbe's approach. And this is, we are, we're service oriented in that sense, that we're looking out to what's the opportunity to bring more light and more more beauty to the world, and to have other people experience the light within, because again, it's within them, right? So it was very interesting. So yeah, so I was sharing with this person that my son is working in camp, and that my other daughter is working in camp, and no, they are not they're actually contributing to the greater good. Okay, so according to Chassidus, every Jewish soul is essentially pure and incorruptible at its core, and nothing can ever sever the eternal bond with the divine. It is from that inner point of essence that the Rebbe sought to connect and build up each individual whom he encountered. I'm sorry, I must have read that before. Okay, so now we're going to talk about this a little bit more, and he calls it here a single point, and you'll see. In 1951, Gershon Kranzler came to interview the newly appointed Rebbe on behalf of the Orthodox Jewish life, to hear what his plans were for the future. Like, what's the mission statement? Like, what's this all about? So throughout the course of their conversation, in which the Rebbe laid out many of the core principles he would put into practice throughout the next 4 decades, he directly addressed this topic of reaching out to non-religious Jews based on an inherent soul connection. And here's what the Rebbe said. This is so beautiful. He says, "It has always been the belief of Chabad that there is not a single Jew, as far as they may seem, or thought himself to have drifted from the center of Yiddishkeit, who does not have some good point, some particular mitzvah that by nature or by inclination he may promote. This spark of good in each soul can and must be utilized for the good." This is why I told you, like, sometimes I encounter, because the fact that I married a Houstonian, so my husband, like, whenever we go to different, I don't know, places, shivas, events that are maybe not within the Orthodox community, whatever, like his name, like they know my in-laws or whatever, they know the family. So we interact with people of that age, that generation. And very often, unfortunately, people will look at us, they'll have this conversation when they meet us, they'll say, oh, I'm also Jewish, but I'm a bad Jew. And we're like, no, like, don't say such words. Like, don't say such words, because it's not true, right? You're not allowed to say Lashon Hara about yourself. It's so not true, right? Every Jew has mitzvahs like a pomegranate, as we saw the Rebbe say last week in the discussion last week, or the week before maybe, right? Again, because you're a soul. Okay, so now this is a beautiful interaction that the Rebbe had with a student, a college student. And the boy asked the Rebbe, what does he do? Like, what do you do? And the Rebbe, the Rebbe asked the boy, what do you do? And so the university boy said that he's in university. He's studying for a master's degree in education. And the Rebbe told him, I also went to university. So the boy was right surprised. And he said to him, and what did you study? Theology? And the Rebbe said, no, I studied electrical engineering, but I prefer to turn on the lights in people's souls. Which is a beautiful, beautiful story. And it's just so true. That's what the Rebbe does. So seeing the young man's confusion and curiosity, the Rebbe explained, you see, every human being has a soul, a divine spark that burns inside of them. Sometimes a person moves away from their inner light. It might even seem that the light of their soul has been snuffed out. But the soul is like a pilot light. It never goes out completely. All it needs is for someone to turn up the flame, to ignite it into a blaze of illumination. This is my goal, to illuminate Jewish life through the soul by brightening and fanning its flame until it burns bright again. Here we see the Rebbe stating his goal explicitly, to directly address the Jewish soul on its own terms and help rekindle its fire against all odds. In fact, it was this very, very belief and grounding in the soul of the Jewish people that inspired the Rebbe to reach out and welcome all who crossed his path, whether in person or through one of his many emissaries across the globe. Okay, so now on page 64, he's going to talk about plugging in. So he says, drawing a parallel between the times and mission of the Baal Shem Tov and his own, right? So this is how we started. We started with the Baal Shem Tov, and now we're talking about the Rebbe. So now the Rebbe himself draws a parallel. And the Rebbe said to a group of visiting Hillel students, Hillel, like the organization, right? We can understand what the Baal Shem Tov did through the relationship of an electric powerhouse with a lamp that is connected to it by a wire. It was the Baal Shem Tov's mission to explain and proclaim that every Jew, without exception, is connected with the powerhouse, and every one of them has a switch of his innermost depths that will be found if searched for. So too, every one of us must try to find the switch in the soul of every Jew. One can never know what will make the connection, perhaps one word, but by this you open up the well or inner fountain of their soul. The Rebbe boldly insisted that all Jews alive after the Holocaust had the privilege and the responsibility to strengthen each other's soul expression and connection to God and the Jewish people. We all have something special to offer the world. You don't have to be a rabbi or a rebbe or a rebbetzin for that matter, right? To do this holy work, each and every one of us. Each of us possesses a unique God-given soul that can attract the infinite light like no other. In the quest to uncover and unleash the power of the soul, one can choose to fixate on the darkness that surrounds it or focus on the inherent light within. And that was something, again, that came across, I hope, from my story yesterday that I gave in that class. That again, we're all emissaries, right? We're all here to do this holy work of showing the world what it is to live with a godly consciousness, with a soul-centered consciousness. And that's what we're all hopefully trying to do every single day. Okay, so now in a separate conversation with a group of students, when asked, what does a Rebbe do? The Rebbe replied, the Jewish people are like the earth, and I think I told you this before, which contains nature's treasures hidden within, underneath. The question is where to dig. Dr. Freud, as we talked about, I think last week or the week before, dug in the human soul and found swampy waters and mire. Dr. Adler found rocks. Contemporary psychiatry searches for ills and traumas that must be uprooted. But when a Rebbe digs, he finds gold, silver, and diamonds. So that's this idea, right? Right. We talked about Freud found the id and the Rebbe found the yid, right? Yes, yes. When you start digging in the consciousness and the subconsciousness of a person, you're going to find a lot of stuff, trauma and pain and character flaws and ego-centeredness and all sorts of just gunk, right? But you got to keep digging. And just like the earth, the first layers is just earth, right? What is it? And then eventually you're going to hit the yid. You're going to hit the diamond, right? The pristine diamond beneath. Our methods and maps of reality determine what we seek and find within ourselves and others. So this goes back to something we talked about in the very beginning, that it's all about perspective. Like if my perspective is that there is a godly soul, that there is a treasure, right? Then that's what I'm going to see in others. But if my perspective is the superficiality of their actions, their behaviors, whatever, that's what I'm going to focus on, then I'm going to have a very limited view of reality and unfortunately a pretty inaccurate one, okay? The prevailing values of the day included defining religiosity based on the level of a person's acquired knowledge and practice, much like in the terms of the Baal Shem Tov, like we were saying, right? The perception was that those who had any self-worth, so to speak, were the Torah educated, the learned, right? So again, it was all about acquired knowledge and practice. Their learning and observance were thus seen to create their connection to God. Like if I'm a learned person and if I'm a Torah observant person, then I'm connected with God. Came the Baal Shem Tov, then came the Lubavitcher Rebbe and emphasized this and made it, again, the hallmark of his mission. No, everybody's connected to God in the same way. In the same way. It's not that one is more connected than the other one, okay? However, Hasidut in general and the Rebbe in particular stress that it is the soul that is primary. Torah study and mitzvah observance are the spiritual tools and language that helps express our internal connection to the divine and each other. But that is already there. That connection is already there. That's why there's no such concept, like I said, of kiruv, right? We're not bringing anybody that's far away closer. They are already close because they already are connected to God. Like that connection can never be severed, no matter what the external circumstances, no matter what they've done, can never be severed, okay? But we each inherently possess this internal connection, and it is always present deep down. There is simply no such thing as a quote unquote bad Jew, what I was telling you before, contrary to what some may claim, sometimes even themselves, right? There are just different dimensions of goodness when seen in the right light. In this spirit, the Rebbe lovingly addressed all Jews on either extreme. To secular Jews, he essentially said, you're not as secular as you think. You have an ancient tradition and an indomitable point of infinite holiness within you that yearns to serve, sing, and soar. This was exactly the kind of accepting, affirming, and empowering message that those estranged from Jewish life and faith needed to hear. God and Torah were already inside them. They just needed to turn on the light, so to speak. And actually, this reminds me, I've probably told you the story a million times, but it's probably worth saying anyway, especially we're on the heels of Gimel Tammuz and talking about, the Rebbe empowering people and turning people into leaders because of this vision, allowing us to have this vision. You have the story of not of his philanthropic efforts, but of his educational efforts. Mr. George Rohr, many, many years ago, we're going back, probably the Rebbe's gone 31 years, so we're probably going back a little bit more than 35 years, close to 40 years ago. The Mr. Rohr started, inspired by the Rebbe, he started in his own modern Orthodox shul in Manhattan. He started a beginner's minyan. It was called a beginner's service. It's still called, okay? On Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. I was very fortunate in my early 20s to be part of that group many, many times. And then later it became a Shabbos beginner's minyan that I was also part of. But the story goes like this, and I've heard the story. Fortunately, I've had the pleasure of hearing the story firsthand several times in my life, and it's worth repeating. When at the first beginner service that Mr. Rohr established on Rosh Hashanah, he had a tremendous success. He had over 100 people that came and joined that minyan. It was geared to, people in Manhattan who wouldn't have, the knowledge to show up at an Orthodox shul, who could benefit from a beginner's minyan where things would be, slower, would be more explanation and so on and so forth. But it would all be, according to halacha, tradition and everything, but it would be approachable. It's kind of like a concept of a Chabad house, right? So it was a beautiful thing. 100 people showed up in Manhattan, and he was so delighted and he was so excited that, his custom was to go to the Rebbe for lekach between Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So when he went during the Aseret Yamei Teshuvah, he went to the Rebbe for lekach. He was so excited that he was going to be able to bring nachas to the Rebbe, and he was going to be able to tell the Rebbe about starting this beginner's minyan and how many people showed up. So he gets to his point in the line and he says to the Rebbe, I want the Rebbe to know that we started a beginner's minyan in the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and over 100 Jews with no background showed up. And he's expecting a big smile from the Rebbe and a big yasher koach. And what happened was the opposite. The Rebbe turned very, very serious. So George tells the story. He thinks to himself in those split seconds, this is like a microsecond. You think, oh, the Rebbe didn't hear me. So he says again, I want the Rebbe to know that we started a beginner's minyan on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and over 100 Jews with no background came. And the Rebbe turns even more serious. So now Mr. Rohr is saying, oh, he must not hear me. So I'm going to say it again, but I'm going to say it louder, right? This is all happening in a split second. And he goes again, now even louder. I would like the Rebbe to know that we had Jews with no background. And the Rebbe says to him, he looks him straight in the eyes and says, I want you to go back to them and tell all those Jews that they have the background of Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. And that obviously changed George's perspective tremendously, right? It was such an eye-opening moment, right? That the Rebbe felt so strongly that no, like you go back and you tell them that they have the background, and that is who they are. That is who they are. And of course, George made it a point to this day, every Yom Kippur service, possibly ever Rosh Hashanah service, but I don't remember, but I do remember very vividly that he would say it on Yom Kippur before Ne'ilah. If I remember correctly, he would say this exact story. And for people, young people like me, who showed up at these beginner services, it was a very pivotal moment to hear those words. It's such a new perspective to see yourself in that light and to say, wait 1 minute, yeah, maybe there's something here. Like I do have something here that is of tremendous import and value. So why did I tell you this? Because it's a great story, but I don't remember why I remember the story. But it's a great story. It's an important story. Okay, so we just have to remember again that's the Rebbe's perspective. It's the soul. We all have a background. We all have a beautiful pedigree. We're all the children of Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. This is not about who does more mitzvahs. This is not about who knows more pages of Gemara. This is about essence. This is about who we are. Okay, so in January 1962, a woman wrote to the Rebbe. She had been raised in a non-believing home. Like so many of us, right? Now she had attended 2 lectures on Torah, True Judaism that touched her deeply and presented her with a dilemma. In what should I believe? She asked the Rebbe. In the path along which I have been raised and educated over many years, or in that which I heard from a stranger in the course of 2 evenings, right? And so many experience that, right? Like we go to this class. I remember the first class I went to Miami. It's part of my story, so you'll hear it when I when I share with you the clip from last night, right? It's like whoa, like my eyes were open to like a different reality. Like, oh my gosh, like there's truth here. But like it's truth that you just heard in the last hour, and then you hear it again in the next hour, and the next year that you go and you're like, okay, but like how does this make sense? Like I've believed all these other things for the last 20 years of my life, and so do my parents, etc. Right? So what follows is a freely translated expert of the Rebbe's response. Listen to this, okay? So the Rebbe says like this. Certainly, you have heard of the expression return to roots. I'm sure that you are also aware that an education does not work in a vacuum, since in each and every individual, there are spiritual dynamics that are rooted in the soul prior to the onset of the educational process, things that stem from the innermost heart of the soul. Furthermore, no education or conditioning can change these things. They can only suppress them for a longer or shorter period of time. This has been repeatedly demonstrated in the field of education, as well as in medical science, biology, and other fields. This is the reason why we often see that a single lecture or a short discussion and quote unquote education of an extremely brief duration might affect a most basic change in a person. And like I said, so many of us have experienced this. Why? Because all this person needed was a catalyst that would initiate the removal of whatever has been covering up that which already exists in the inner reaches of his soul. So, again, everything else was just a facade, everything else was just a costume, right? And you just have to take off the costume. The above is the answer to your question. What should I believe? The very fact that you were so deeply impressed by what you heard in the course of 2 evenings attests to the truth of what our sages told us thousands of years ago. All Jews are believers, the children of believers, right? We are maminim b'nei maminim. It is only that their faith might at times be obscured by a layer of foreign elements, like these phrases say in Spanish, the costume, right? My hope is that these few lines will suffice to shed light on the matter. So the Rebbe sought to instill in all receptive hearts this redemptive belief in the divine point within every Jew. This helped inspire and initiate the miraculous return of so many to Jewish faith and life in the second half of the 20th century, as this beautiful Persian woman, Tova, was telling me, right? That the Ayatollah was the best thing that happened to them, because thanks to the Ayatollah, they ended up in America and the Rebbe found them, right? The Chabad found them and showed them who they really are, because otherwise they were completely secularized and completely I guess blinded to their essence, right? And now thanks to that, they changed their lives and have children and grandchildren and who are giving them tremendous nachas and all the things. Okay, so in many ways this belief was predicated on the viewpoint that a Jew's faith, spiritual state, and ultimate value in God's eyes are not something that one must earn as a reward. Rather, they must be claimed as an inheritance, right? Torah tziva lanu Moshe Morasha, Torah tziva lanu Moshe Morasha Kehilas Yaakov. Okay, so it's an inheritance of an inheritance that an inheritance. There's nothing you can do. Like it's yours. You just have to claim it. You just have to go show up and claim it. It's yours. The Rebbe's, there's nothing you need to do to earn it. It's inherently yours. The Rebbe's overwhelming message was, you already belong. You are already holy. You are already loved. Now you too must love and be loving, help others feel that they also belong. And this, by the way, is pivotal, because it doesn't stop with you. It's not about you becoming narcissistic. It's like narcissistic is about, oh, you discover that is also the catalyst for you to show other people, right? You also need to express that love, right? You also need to help other people show that they belong, right? Because again, we are all one family, therefore we take care of each other, right? Going back to the boys putting on tefillin, even in the pro-Palestinian parade. Okay, so here we go. Actually, here we go. The story of George Rohr was here in this chapter, so I'm not going to read it again, but I'll read a little bit of the background so you know. So George Rohr is a businessman who actively supports many Lubavitch activities, and he once shared with the Rebbe that he had an organized Rosh Hashanah service for 130 Jews who had no background. So there's the story, but because I guess I've heard the story so many times, I hope that maybe I'll even said it better. But anyway, okay, so the point here is this very point, that even Jews with little to no traditional learning, experience, or observance had a place not just at the table, but at the head of the table, was a cornerstone of the Rebbe's curriculum for communal rejuvenation and spiritual renaissance. Once again, we see the Rebbe focusing on the inherent light of the soul rather than on religious behavior or accomplishments as defining a Jew's essence. And again, this also goes back to what we learned so deeply when we were learning Shara B'tachon so many times, right? This idea that we had a whole discussion. The Chovos HaLevavos, the Shara B'tachon, goes into a whole discussion about how does B'tachon apply with regards to my reward in the world to come, right? And he's so adamant that we're not trusting our brownie point, our list of checklist of the mitzvahs that we did, right? As that's going to get me the reward. It's really not. It's the bitachon that God rewards regardless, that God loves us regardless, that God is reliable, that God is there for us. And that's really where it is. We're not going through this experience because we're relying that because I did the mitzvahs, I'm going to get something in exchange. It's not about that. It's about the relationship, right? It's totally about the relationship. So it's not about my behavior or my checklist or my accomplishments. There's something so much deeper. And once you understand about yourself that you are a soul, right? You can enter that relationship with that depth. You don't need the superficiality of I need to do this checklist because that's what's going to get me something. No, this is not about getting anything. This is about totally being plugged in to your soul and to the source of your soul, to God. Okay, so every Jew is an illustrious child of our holy patriarchs and matriarchs with equal access to the spiritual inheritance they bequeathed us. This was the Rebbe's empowering message to those who felt far from any meaningful Jewish life or identity. At the same time, the Rebbe was telling the multitudes of religious Jews that they aren't as separate as they think. All of Israel is bound together with each other, with God, and with the Torah. In the Rebbe's own words, spoken on the eve of his inauguration, my mission statement is to communicate the essential truth that love of God and Torah without love of our fellow Jew is not lasting or true. You cannot fully have one without the other. Echoing the Baal Shem Tov time and again, we find examples of the Rebbe reminding the more punctilious among our people of the enduring soul within each and every Jew, regardless of their external life experiences and choices up until that point. In fact, the idea is that we're all God's children and that no one other than God can judge the state of another soul had always been a fundamental principle of Hasidic teaching over the centuries, as we can see from the following stories. So look at this, okay? So the seventh Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzhak Schneerson, I'm sorry, the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, the seventh Rebbe was our Rebbe, okay, once referred to a person in a letter as a God-fearing man. When asked why he bestowed such a title upon a person who was known to not be religious, the Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzhak, replied, when a pathologist is given a blood sample or a particle of body tissue to analyze in his laboratory, he peers at it through his microscope and subjects it to a series of chemical tests and procedures. If he finds so much as the slightest trace of a certain element or a single cell of a certain organism, he notes it in his report. For through the quantity might be minuscule and hardly worthy of regard, it points to the existence or the potential for the existence of much greater quantities in the person. So here the Rebbe now says, I am a spiritual pathologist. Okay, so he's able to see. So don't tell me that this person doesn't deserve the title of being God-fearing. I see the pathology. I see that there. It might be like minute, but it's there, right? So yeah, he deserves to be called a God-fearing man. Okay, all right. So Rabbi Mendel Kalmenson was a Chabad chassid and a successful diamond merchant. During a private audience with Rabbi Shalom Dovber, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe praised several individuals who appeared on the surface to be simple and unremarkable. So now this person is going to react to the Rebbe's praise of these people who seemed on the surface to be like not praiseworthy, let's say, right? He was quite surprised. And when he voiced it, the Rebbe Shalom Dovber replied, they possess special qualities. And the businessman, the diamond dealer, was like, I don't see it, right? And with that conversation, he moved on to other topics. At a later point in the conversation, the Rebbe suddenly asked Reb Monia whether he had a pouch of diamonds with him. Reb Monia took out a pouch and displayed the diamonds, pointing out the incredible quality of one specific stone. The Rebbe remarked, I don't see anything. I don't see it. I don't see anything special about it. Reb Monia replied, for that, one must be a maven, right? You need to be a maven in diamonds to be able to see like why this diamond is so much more special than what's so magnificent about this one stone. Rav Shalom Dover responded pointedly, when it comes to seeing the special qualities of a Jew's soul, one must also be a maven, right? A Rebbe is a maven. A Rebbe sees, but a Rebbe is teaching us how we need to see. You don't need to see it the way a Rebbe sees it, but you need to have the perspective, right? You don't need to actually physically, the Rebbe physically sees it, right? Like we know that they are able to see, but we need to know that that's the perspective, that's the approach that we need to have. Anyone can make a snap judgment based on surface external markers, such as outwardly expressed learning and religious observance. But a Jew is like a diamond, which can be buried and covered in dirt and sediment on the outside, while at the same time shining brilliantly on the inside. The way you view others determines in large part what you see in them. So again, it's all about your perspective. If you have that perspective, you're going to see beauty. If you have another perspective, that's what you're going to see. Are you focused on the outer coal or on the inner flame that is just waiting to be kindled into a holy fire? Okay, so I'll finish the chapter. Amazing. Every Jew a diamond. So on a hot Sunday afternoon in the summer of 1991, an elderly woman, you might be familiar with the story, it's a very popular story, an elderly woman was patiently waiting for her turn in the long line of people from all walks of life who had come to receive the Rebbe's blessing and a dollar bill to give to tzedakah. Actually, somebody just told me, who was it? Oh yeah, my hostess in Connecticut told me that she went to the Rebbe. Was it her? Maybe I can't remember, but somebody went to the Rebbe and the Rebbe gave them $1 and they immediately there was a pushka right there. So they put it in the pushka and then all the Hasidim were like, no, not supposed to give it away. And then they were trying to like find the dollar, whatever. And we were saying like, no, but you did the right thing. Like it's actually meant for that, right? It's just that people saved it and they would put another dollar in its stead into tzedakah. But it just reminded me like, oh my gosh, I think they were saying they were a child. She was a child, or her husband was anyway, I don't remember. But anyway, it's a cute story. Okay, so this woman is going to the Rebbe and she's getting dollared by the Rebbe. And when her turn finally arrived, she could not contain herself and she blurted out of so much love, right? Rebbe, I've been standing here for only an hour and I'm already exhausted. You've been standing here for hours and hours. How do you not get tired? The Rebbe smiled gently and said, when you're counting diamonds, you don't get tired, right? Imagine if we were all counting diamonds, we would be ecstatic. No matter the external appearance, the Rebbe saw what is buried deep within. In this way, the Rebbe applied the Talmudic saying, know before whom you stand, which is generally applied to one's awareness of God's presence his approach was to a more interpersonal realm, right? Usually that means that you're standing before God. But in a certain way, the Rebbe embodied this approach in his interpersonal relationships. By foregrounding the spiritual essence of the one with whom you are interacting, an immediate awe and appreciation for the utter uniqueness of their being is brought into focus. All further interactions then flow from this infinite and loving point. Based on this spiritual understanding of the nature of the Jewish soul, the Rebbe would continue to offer corrective insight even to those already, quote unquote, on board and engaged in the wider project of Jewish, quote unquote, outreach. This is because there is a perpetually lurking danger in the holy work of outreach to see oneself as better than or above those whom you are reaching out to. So we don't want to fall into that trap, obviously. Bringing the closer. Okay, so a group of representatives from a well-known Jewish outreach organization once visited the Rebbe and sought his blessing for their work in Kiruv Rechokim, right? What I was saying before, bringing close those who are far from Judaism. These are words that this is a concept that is contrary to the Rebbe's approach. The Rebbe's face grew serious. I strongly object to this expression, he said. What do we know about who is close or far? Only God can judge these matters. He paused thoughtfully before continuing. Besides, no one is ever truly far from God. Instead, you should call it Kiruv Keruvim, said the Rebbe, his smile returning, bringing those who are close even closer. Based on the spiritually affirmative model and method of his spiritual ancestor, the Baal Shem Tov, coupled with his undying love and concern for the Jewish soul in a world turned upside down, the Rebbe turned Judaism inside out, putting the soul front and center. From this place, all are holy, each in their own mysterious way. And it is ultimately only when each lamp is lit, when each voice is heard, and when each soul is seen for what it truly is, that we will deeply know and understand that all your people are righteous. Only then will we merit to be called a light unto the nations. The Baal Shem Tov and the Rebbe, each in their own day and way, brought that day 1 hour closer through their unceasing love of God, of Torah, and the Jewish people, and the whole world in all of its myriad expressions of ultimate unity. Beautiful. I think it's actually a beautiful chapter to have read in honor of Gimel Tammuz. So everything is divinely ordained. And again, hopefully this, even though it's not straight up a discussion of bitachon as we have done for so many years, is still helping us like keep that kind of that perspective, because so much of the application of surrender and bitachon is really having a positive perspective, and a positive perspective starts with looking at things in human beings in our lives from the point of view of the essence of the soul. Any questions, any comments?
Yeah, yeah, Elle, I just have one. My family comes from both Ukraine and Vilna, and grandfather, my great grandfather was a rabbi in one of the shtetls near the Vilna. They studied over there in the yeshiva. So we were a misnagid, and on my father's side, we weren't. So Litvak and Glitz, but I learned the history because I read the book and I studied it, that the Baal Shem Tov changed everything because in Vilna they had the money and they learned and they thought they were above everyone, and the Baal Shem Tov brought it to the people
Right.
that they didn't have and they couldn't, and he enlightened them, and then it all merged.
Yes.
And the Vilna wasn't very happy. There was war between them, but it in the end it spread.
Yeah.
Baal Shem Tov spread it, and that's what it needed.
Yeah, and during the time of the Alter Rebbe, there was a lot of opposition, and you had
Mm-hmm.
big fight between the
Mm-hmm.
Hasidim and the Misnagdim. But nowadays,
Mm-hmm.
Baruch Hashem, we're at a point in
Yes.
history. We were just having this discussion.
Now it doesn't matter. Now
It doesn't
it's
matter.
no,
That
it
doesn't
doesn't
matter.
matter.
And again, it
Yeah.
goes back to, you see the eternality of the Rebbe's approach and the Rebbe's message. What I was saying, how Larry King and this Dr. Nadler were so wrong after Gimel Tammuz, and you see how the words of Rabbi Lipsker, Alav Shalom, and Rabbi Simon Jacobson are so true. You see that today that division doesn't exist. You see that everybody has embraced this approach. Everybody is putting on tefillin on people. Everybody's putting tefillin on Israeli soldiers. Everybody is in the work of kiruv, right? Everybody understands that the Rebbe's approach. And so, yeah, and as I was saying before, I don't think there's any successful pulpit rabbi today who is not using some element of Hasidus in their approach.
Yeah, they do. I love it. I love to learn on Shabbos. Love it.
Yeah.
Yes, love it. Every word. I follow everything with Rabbi Chaim. I follow every word.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful.
It's water to their soul. Yeah. It's like,
Yes, my soul is, like a sponge, and it's just wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just telling my friend, I have a friend staying over, a young girl, and I was telling her, did you ever read Towards a Meaningful Life? She's like, no. I'm like, oh my gosh, like you have to read that book. Like that's like the first book, you're right, Simon Jacobson's book, the first book that I really ever like read. And it's like
Best book, best
Towards a
book.
Meaningful Life. Now we might see it like, oh, it's a foundational book. But when you haven't tasted that approach to life, like that perspective of the Rebbe, of Hasidus, to the practicalities of the life that we know, marriage and family and relationships and, parenting and all the things. Every chapter goes through money, all things. It's like, it opens your eyes, right? And then, of course, as you're saying, Yocheved, like you start, digging deeper and learning more in depth. But I think, for anybody who's never read the book, it's a wonderful book to read, and it's a wonderful book to gift to somebody who wants to start somewhere, who doesn't know where to start. So anyways, ladies, so God willing, I think I'm here next week. So God willing, we will see each other next week and we'll continue our discussion. And I'll try to remember, Bli Neder, to send you the recording from last night's event as well, because I think you'll enjoy it. Okay.
Thank you, Yael.
Okay.
Have a good Shabbos.
Have a good Shabbos, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for coming.